I didn't know my life would change because of a buffet table. Not because of cheating, not because of money, not because of some explosive secret, but because my future sister-in-law decided that our wedding was cheap and embarrassing. My name is Hannah Miller, and 2 years ago, I married the love of my life, Stanley Harper. It was supposed to be simple, soft garden light, 60 people we truly loved, a buffet dinner with food we actually enjoyed eating, no ballroom chandeliers, no five-figure floral arches, no orchestra, just us. But to Stanley's older sister, Laura Harper, that was a disgrace. The first time she said it, she didn't even lower her voice. That's basically a backyard party, she laughed at Sunday dinner, right in front of Stanley's parents. I remember how my fingers tightened around my water glass, how Stanley squeezed my hand under the table, how his mother, Penny, quickly changed the subject. But Laura didn't stop. She said buffet weddings look cheap in photos. She said guests wouldn't drive 40 minutes for something that small. She said the family name deserved better. I told myself she was just being dramatic. I was wrong. Because 3 months later, she stood in her mother's kitchen and told me, loudly, that I was ruining Stanley's only chance at a real wedding. And Stanley did something no one expected. He uninvited his own sister. What happened next didn't just fracture a wedding guest list. It unraveled a marriage, destroyed a luxury second wedding, exposed public humiliation online, and eventually led to a separation, a relocation across the country, and a family that may never be whole again. And the strange part? Stanley and I never raised our voices. We just chose peace. Sometimes karma doesn't shout. It quietly waits. And when it arrives, it doesn't knock. It collapses everything that was built on appearances. I was 28 when Stanley proposed, and I had already learned the hard way that love doesn't get stronger just because it gets louder. I worked in graphic design, the kind of job where people assume you're always carefree because you're creative. But the truth is, I'm meticulous. I live off lists, color-coded calendars, deadlines, and quiet routines that keep my anxiety from taking over. If I know what's coming next, I can breathe. Stanley, 32, steady, warm, unshowy, was the opposite in the best way. He worked a normal office job, nothing flashy, but he was the kind of man who remembered the little things you never thought you'd say out loud. The first time I noticed him, it wasn't romantic. It was practical. I was at a park, sitting on a bench with my laptop open because my apartment's internet had crashed. I was trying to finish a client design and silently panicking. Stanley walked by with a coffee in one hand and a paper bag in the other, stopped, and asked if I needed help. I expected a stranger's empty politeness. Instead, he asked real questions. Is it a deadline? Do you have a hotspot? Do you want me to grab you a charger? There's an outlet near the cafe. That was Stanley. He didn't perform kindness. He did it. We started dating after that, slowly at first. He didn't flood me with grand gestures. He didn't play games. He just showed up every time. When my mother got sick for a few weeks and I had to drive back and forth between work and her house, Stanley came with me. He didn't make it about himself. He cooked dinner in my mom's kitchen like he'd been born there, washed dishes without being asked, and sat with my mom when she couldn't sleep. That's when my heart did the thing it only does when it's truly safe. It settled. The 5 years before the ring. We built a relationship out of ordinary days. Grocery shopping, where he always put my favorite snack in the cart without saying anything. Movie nights that ended with him absent-mindedly rubbing my knuckles. Dumb arguments about laundry and where to store the vacuum. Long drives with music too loud and windows down. We moved in together after 4 years, into a modest apartment that fit our budget and our personalities. It wasn't Instagram perfect. It was real, cozy, a little cluttered, full of the kind of warmth you don't photograph. And that mattered to us. Stanley's family, though, that was a different world. Meeting his parents. His parents were Trenton Harper and Penny Harper. Trenton was 62, the kind of father who believed he could solve conflict by speaking less and working more. He was polite, sometimes distant, like he never wanted to say the wrong thing. He would ask how work was going, nod at your answers, and then go quiet again. Penny, 60, was warmer. She had soft eyes, the kind that always looked like she was holding emotions behind them. She was the type to bring extra food to the table, just in case, to send you home with leftovers you didn't ask for, to touch your arm lightly while she spoke like she wanted you to feel included. I liked Penny immediately, but there was always a small tension underneath her kindness, like she'd spent years learning how to keep peace in a house where certain people were louder than others. I didn't understand why at the time. Then I met Laura. Laura and the invisible measuring tape. Stanley only had one sibling, his older sister, Laura Harper, 35. Laura was polished in a way that felt strategic. Hair always styled like she had a standing appointment, nails always done, outfit always coordinated. She spoke like every sentence was a subtle test. She was married to Alec, 37, who worked in finance and carried himself like a man who'd learned early that silence can look like power. They lived in a house that made our apartment feel like a storage unit, and they wanted everyone to know it. Europe trips twice a year, designer labels, a social media feed that looked like a luxury brand advertisement. At first, I tried to admire it. I told myself, good for them. They've built a life they love. But the first time Laura looked at me, I felt it. That invisible measuring tape, like she was sizing me up in ways I didn't even know existed. The proposal. 8 months before our wedding, Stanley proposed. Nothing fancy. No flash mob, no private chef, no drone footage. He took me to the park where we had our first date. Same bench, same path, even the same little cafe nearby that sold the coffee he bought for me back then. The day was quiet, crisp, the kind of weather where your breath comes out in soft clouds. He didn't kneel immediately. He just sat next to me, eyes on the pond. Then he said softly, I don't want a life that looks perfect. I want a life that feels right, with you. And then he pulled out the ring. My heart didn't race because it was dramatic. It raced because it was true. I said yes, and when he slid the ring onto my finger, it fit so perfectly I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it felt like the universe had just clicked into place. Why we chose a small wedding. From the beginning, we agreed. Small wedding, simple, affordable. We weren't trying to impress anyone. We didn't want debt hanging over our marriage before we even said our vows. Our budget was $12,000 total. Venue, food, flowers, photographer, everything. We found a garden venue about 40 minutes outside the city. Small but beautiful, with an indoor backup space just in case. Stone pathways, a little pond, wooden beams inside, big windows that caught sunlight like honey. Maximum capacity, 80. We planned for around 60. It felt like us. And I remember thinking, standing there in that garden with Stanley's hand in mine, this is going to be such a peaceful start. The only thing I didn't account for was how threatened some people feel when you choose peace instead of performance. The first signs I ignored. Looking back, the warning signs weren't loud at first. They were tiny moments. Laura's smile that didn't reach her eyes when Stanley introduced me as the one. Alec's polite silence, like he'd already decided staying neutral was safer than being kind. Penny's quick subject changes whenever Laura entered the room, like she was bracing. But the biggest sign? Stanley would get slightly tense before any family gathering. Not nervous, not scared, just prepared. Like he'd learned that love in his family came with conditions. And I didn't understand that yet. I thought it was just family dynamics. I thought, once we're married, things will settle. I didn't realize the wedding wasn't the end of the conflict. It was the beginning. The first comment Laura made about our wedding could have been brushed off. The second one couldn't. The third one made it clear it wasn't accidental. It was intentional. Sunday dinner. The beginning. We were at Stanley's parents' house when Laura first reacted to the venue photos. I had my phone out, showing Penny pictures of the garden, the stone paths, the pond, the indoor space with wooden beams. Laura leaned in. She didn't smile. Is that the actual venue? She asked, tilting her head, or just the grounds around it? It's the venue, I replied calmly. Indoor and outdoor. How many people does it hold? 80 max. We're inviting 60. She laughed. Not a polite laugh, not surprised. Just dismissive. That's basically a backyard party. The room shifted. Stanley's hand slid over mine under the table, his thumb pressed gently against my palm, grounding me. It's what we want, he said evenly. Laura shrugged. I just hope you're not expecting people to drive 40 minutes for a 3-hour event. Penny quickly asked about the menu. I explained the buffet dinner. Laura cut in again. You're doing buffet? Buffets always look cheap in photos. I swallowed the first defensive response that came to my mind. I didn't want to start something, so I smiled. We like buffet. She leaned back in her chair, satisfied. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. The coffee shop incident. A week later, Stanley and I ran into Laura and Alec at a cafe. It should have been casual. Instead, it felt like a review meeting. Have you picked a photographer? She asked. Yes. How much? I told her. Her eyebrows shot up. That's practically student pricing. She launched into a story about the photographer she and Alec used for some corporate event. $5,000 just for the day, she said proudly. Stanley kept his voice neutral. We're happy with ours. Laura smiled thinly. Of course. That phrase started to appear often. Of course. It sounded supportive. It never was. The phone calls. Then Stanley started getting calls. During lunch breaks, during his commute, sometimes late in the evening. He would come home looking tired. "She called again," he'd say, loosening his tie. "What did she say this time?" He would hesitate. "She's worried the family will be embarrassed." I would feel the heat rise behind my eyes. Embarrassed by what? "She thinks people will assume we're struggling financially." That one hurt more than I expected. We weren't wealthy, but we were stable, responsible, thoughtful. We were choosing not to overspend. "She said maybe we should postpone," Stanley continued quietly. "Save more. Do something proper." "What's proper?" I asked. He gave a small, humorless laugh. "Apparently at least $50,000. $50,000. I had grown up in a household where $50,000 meant security, safety, not centerpieces. I tried to keep my voice steady. "What did you tell her?" "That she was being ridiculous. He always defended us." But he kept answering her calls. "Why do you keep picking up?" I asked one night. He sighed. "She's my sister. If I ignore her, she'll just escalate." That word stuck with me. Escalate. Like this was already a situation with levels. The subtle shift. After that, every family interaction carried tension. Laura stopped making offhand comments. She started making statements. At another dinner, she said, "People remember weddings for decades. It's the first impression of your marriage." At a family barbecue, she remarked, "When Alec and I renew our vows, we're doing something truly special." There it was. Comparison. Not open, not loud, but deliberate. I started noticing Penny's discomfort. The way she would smooth her napkin over and over when Laura spoke. The way Trenton would clear his throat but say nothing. No one challenged Laura directly. They just endured her. And I began to understand something about Stanley. He had grown up in the shadow of his sister's expectations. And now, by choosing something different, he was stepping out of it. Penny's birthday, the crack in the surface. 3 months before the wedding, everything shifted from passive-aggressive to public. It was Penny's birthday. About 20 people were there. Extended family, friends. I was in the kitchen helping Penny arrange a dessert tray when Laura walked in. She didn't even greet me. "Have you sent invitations yet?" "Yes." "Can I see?" I showed her a photo. Simple white cardstock. Black text. Elegant but minimal. Our names, date, location. She stared at it for too long. "They look like business cards." I blinked. "They're clean," I replied. "That's what we wanted." "You're being defensive," she said lightly. "I'm just trying to help." Penny stepped in softly. "Laura, leave it." Laura ignored her. "I need to be honest," she continued, louder now. "You're ruining Stanley's one chance at a real wedding." The air in the kitchen thickened. He deserves better than a garden party with a buffet line. My pulse roared in my ears. The family deserves better. Her voice carried into the living room. Conversation outside stopped. Trenton walked in. "What's going on?" Laura turned toward him. "Someone needs to talk sense into Stanley and Hannah. They're embarrassing the whole family." And that was the moment I realized. This was never about a buffet. It was about control. Stanley walked into the kitchen. "What's your problem?" he asked, his voice calm but tight. Laura's expression hardened. "Your problem," she said, "is marrying someone who doesn't respect you enough to plan a proper wedding." I felt like someone had slapped me. Stanley stepped in front of me slightly. "Stop!" But Laura didn't. "She's trying to save money for herself later," she snapped, "trapping you into a joke of a marriage." The room went silent. Even Penny looked stunned. And that was when Stanley did something I didn't expect. He raised his voice. "If you can't respect our choices," he said clearly, "you're not invited." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Laura stared at him. "You're not serious." "I am." Trenton shifted uncomfortably. Penny said nothing. Laura grabbed her purse. "This is a mistake," she said coldly. "You'll regret it." Alec followed her out. The door closed. And in that silence, something inside the Harper family cracked. But none of us knew yet. It was only the beginning. The kitchen still smelled like vanilla frosting and roasted chicken when Stanley uninvited his sister. I remember the clock on the wall ticking too loudly. Laura stood frozen for a second. Her lips parted like she couldn't quite believe what she had heard. "You're choosing her over your own family?" she asked, her voice sharp but controlled. Stanley didn't hesitate. "I'm choosing my future wife." My chest tightened when he said that. Not because it felt victorious, because it felt heavy. Laura turned to their parents. "Are you seriously going to let him do this?" Trenton looked like a man who had been handed a live wire and didn't know whether to grab it or drop it. "We'll talk about this later," he muttered. Penny's eyes were glassy. She whispered, "Laura, this isn't the place." But Laura wasn't done. She pointed at me. "You don't even care about this family. If you did, you wouldn't be cutting corners." Cutting corners. As if choosing within our means was laziness. As if intimacy was a downgrade. Stanley's jaw tightened. Enough. It wasn't loud, but it was final. Laura grabbed her purse, the leather strap snapping against her arm. "You're making a mistake," she repeated. And when people laugh at your wedding, don't say I didn't warn you." Then she walked out. Alec followed without looking at anyone. The front door shut. And just like that, Penny's birthday party was over. The aftermath of the scene. The rest of the evening felt like walking through fog. Conversations resumed, but softer, shorter. People left earlier than usual. Penny pulled me aside before we left. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "She was out of line." I nodded. I didn't trust myself to speak. Trenton said he'd talk to Laura, but his voice lacked conviction. On the drive home, Stanley gripped the steering wheel harder than necessary. "I should have done that sooner," he said. "Uninvite her? Stand up to her." I turned toward him. "You always stand up for me." He shook his head slightly. "Not like that." There was something in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not anger. Relief. Like he'd finally crossed a line he'd been too afraid to approach his whole life. The text message. 2 days later, Laura texted Stanley. He showed it to me without hesitation. "I'm disappointed in you. I was trying to protect you. One day you'll realize I was right." No apology. No reflection. Just righteousness. Stanley didn't respond, and the silence between siblings stretched. The wedding day. April arrived faster than expected. I woke up that morning with butterflies in my stomach, not from fear, but anticipation. The sky was clear. The garden venue glowed under soft sunlight. The pond reflected the trees like glass. We had 58 guests. Not 200, not 120. 58. And every single one of them mattered to us. The buffet tables looked beautiful. White linens, simple centerpieces, warm food that actually smelled like comfort instead of prestige. Our photographer moved quietly between moments, capturing laughter, tears, hands intertwined. No one laughed. No one mocked. No one complained about driving 40 minutes. They danced, they ate, they hugged us tightly. Penny cried during our vows. Trenton clapped Stanley on the back with pride. And for a few hours, the tension disappeared. Laura and Alec were not there. Their absence was noticeable, but it wasn't catastrophic. It was peaceful. When Stanley and I stood under the string lights that evening, swaying to our first dance, he leaned close and whispered, "This is perfect." And it was. The announcement. We went on a short honeymoon. 4 days at a bed and breakfast a few hours away. Quiet mornings, fresh air, no drama. When we returned, Penny called. "Can you come over Saturday?" she asked. "Laura has news." My stomach tightened. We went. Laura and Alec were already sitting in the living room when we arrived. She barely looked at us. Penny brought coffee. Trenton cleared his throat. Laura spoke. "Alec and I are renewing our vows." Silence. She corrected herself. "Actually, we're doing a full second wedding. The first one was too small." The irony was almost cruel. She talked for 20 minutes straight. Ballroom downtown. Designer gown. Live band. 200 guests. Budget, $120,000. I felt Stanley stiffen beside me. "How are you paying for it?" I asked carefully. Alex shifted slightly. "Our parents are helping." Laura smiled. "Mostly my parents." Penny looked at Trenton. Trenton nodded slowly. "We want to do something special for Laura." Stanley's voice was calm. "You didn't offer us anything." Penny looked uncomfortable. "We did ask if you needed help." "You wrote us a check?" Stanley pressed gently. "No," she admitted. Laura leaned back, crossing her legs elegantly. "Some people actually value their marriages enough to celebrate them properly." She looked directly at me when she said it. The room felt smaller. Stanley stood up. "We're leaving." Penny tried to stop us. "Please stay." "No." We left. The drive home. Stanley didn't speak for several minutes. Then he said quietly, "They're giving her a $100,000 party." I stared out the window, and we got nothing. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. Laura had humiliated us publicly. Now she was being rewarded. And something shifted in Stanley that day. Not anger. Distance. The kind that grows when you realize fairness isn't equally distributed in your own family. We didn't know yet that this luxury wedding would never happen. We didn't know deposits were already being placed. We didn't know Facebook posts were being written. We didn't know karma had already started moving. All we knew was this. The girl who mocked our garden wedding was about to build a palace. And palaces built on pride have very weak foundations. That night after we left Stanley's parents' house, I didn't cry. I thought I would. I thought I'd collapse into anger or jealousy or something dramatic enough to match the absurdity of what we'd just heard. But I didn't. I sat on the edge of our bed, slowly taking off my earrings, and felt something worse. Disappointment. Stanley stood by the dresser, staring at nothing. "They never offered," he said finally. "Not really." "They asked if we needed help," I replied gently. "That's not the same." He wasn't wrong. When Penny had asked if we needed money for the wedding, Stanley had declined. He was proud, independent. He didn't want to feel indebted. But Laura hadn't been asked if she needed help. She had demanded it, and somehow that worked. I walked over and touched Stanley's arm. "It's not about the money," I said softly. "I know," he answered, but his jaw tightened, and I knew he wasn't just thinking about dollars. He was thinking about value, the growing distance. Over the next few weeks, things shifted subtly. Stanley stopped calling his parents as often. He used to check in midweek, just to chat. Now it was once every couple of weeks, sometimes less. When Penny texted him photos of Lara's wedding planning, dress fittings, venue tours, sample menus, he would glance at the screen, then lock his phone without responding. Lara created a separate Instagram account dedicated to her second wedding. 200 guests, ballroom chandeliers, designer gown previews. Every post dripped with intention. Doing it right this time. Restoring family tradition. Elevated elegance. The captions felt pointed, not directly at us, but through us. The social media echo. One evening, I was scrolling mindlessly when I saw Lara's new post. A mock-up of her invitation suite. Gold foil, embossed lettering, silk ribbon. The caption read, "Some milestones deserve proper celebration." I stared at it longer than I should have. Stanley noticed. "Don't," he said quietly. I wasn't. You were. He wasn't angry, just tired. I put my phone down. "You okay?" I asked. He hesitated. I thought once we were married, things would settle. So did I. But instead, it felt like the wedding had split the family in half. Not loudly, not explosively, just along a fault line that had always existed. The first crack in the luxury plan. 6 months after Lara announced her grand second wedding, Stanley's father called. He asked Stanley to come over alone. Stanley said no. "If you want to talk," he told Trenton, "you can come here, or we can meet somewhere public." That was new. Stanley had never set boundaries like that before. Trenton came to our apartment that evening. He sat stiffly on our couch, hands clasped between his knees. "I need to tell you something," he said. My heart beat faster. Lara's wedding wasn't happening. Stanley blinked. "What do you mean?" Trenton exhaled slowly. "We pulled our financial support." The air in the room shifted. Not shock. Not satisfaction. Something more complicated. The explanation. Trenton stayed for over an hour. After agreeing to fund the second wedding, Lara had gone into full production mode. Wedding planner, $15,000. Venue deposit, $25,000 up front. Designer dress, $8,000. Band, $12,000. Flowers, $6,000. Videographer, $9,000. And that was just the beginning. She didn't consult us, Trenton admitted. She just sent invoices. They had agreed on contributing $80,000. She was already exceeding it with deposits. When Trenton told her to slow down, she demanded more. She said we'd need to give at least 90, he said quietly. Penny had hesitated. She wanted fairness. She reminded Trenton they had given Lara $15,000 for her first wedding years ago. Stanley had never taken anything. In fact, Penny had offered us money after our wedding. Stanley declined. He'd said if they really wanted to help, they could contribute toward a future house. Penny agreed. But then Lara announced her second wedding. And suddenly priorities shifted. The real breaking point. The financial tension wasn't what made Penny draw the line. It was humiliation. A friend of Penny's had seen Lara posting in a local Facebook group. In those posts, Lara had referred to our wedding as an embarrassment, a picnic pretending to be a ceremony, proof that some people don't understand class. She wrote that her parents were funding a real wedding to restore the family's reputation. Penny saw screenshots. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She told Trenton she was done. "If you give her another $1, she told him, "I will leave." That was the first time in decades Penny had drawn a line. Trenton called Lara. He told her they were withdrawing support. Lara thought he was joking. He wasn't. She yelled. She accused. She blamed. When he mentioned the Facebook post, she froze. Then she said they were taken out of context. He didn't argue. He hung up. She called back 17 times that night. He didn't answer. By the final voicemail, she wasn't angry anymore. She was begging. She said she'd lose all her deposits, Trenton told us quietly. Stanley sat still. How much of it was her own money? He asked. $25,000 for the venue deposit, Trenton admitted. Gone. My internal conflict. When Trenton left that night, Stanley and I sat in silence. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt unsettled. "Do you feel bad?" I asked him. He stared at the floor. "A little. Even after everything? She's still my sister." That's the thing about family. They can wound you deeply, and you still remember the child they used to be. "I don't want her life to collapse," he continued quietly. "I just wanted her to stop attacking ours." I reached for his hand. "I know." And in that moment, I realized something important. Karma isn't satisfying when it hits someone you once loved. It's just heavy. But we didn't know yet that this was only stage one. Because losing funding wasn't what would break Laura. Losing control would. If the funding pull was the first fracture, what came next was the collapse. And the collapse wasn't dramatic at first. It was administrative. Rescheduled dates, canceled vendors, revised budgets, new spreadsheets. Laura didn't give up immediately. She pivoted. The scramble. Within days of Trenton pulling the money, Laura started damage control. She tried to secure a personal loan. Denied. She asked Alex's parents to increase their contribution beyond the original $30,000. They refused, and not quietly. One of Alex's aunts had seen the same Facebook post Penny had. Screenshots had circulated. The language wasn't subtle. Restoring our reputation after my brother's embarrassing wedding. Alex's mother confronted him. Is this how she talks about family? That conversation didn't go well. Alex's parents reduced their contribution from $30,000 to $10,000. Suddenly, the numbers didn't work. The ballroom canceled. The $25,000 deposit was gone. The wedding planner contract was terminated. Non-refundable. The band required another deposit to hold the new date. Laura couldn't pay it. Everything started unraveling. The emotional spiral. Penny met me for coffee one afternoon. Her hands trembled slightly when she wrapped them around her cup. She's calling me crying, Penny said softly, saying she made a mistake. What did you tell her? I told her the mistake wasn't just the Facebook posts. Penny's voice cracked. It was how she treated you from the beginning. That part mattered to me, not because I needed validation, but because it meant Penny had finally acknowledged what I had endured. Did she apologize? I asked. Penny looked down. No. What did she say? She said you made your choices and she made hers. There it was again, that refusal to step into accountability. Even when everything was collapsing. Alex starts to shift. Months passed. The second wedding date was pushed from June to September, then to November, then tentative, then quiet. Stanley heard through Trenton that Alec had been pulling back. She talks about nothing but the wedding, Alec reportedly told Trenton. She cries about the ballroom like it was a person. Laura built spreadsheets trying to recreate the luxury version at a cheaper price. She explored taking loans in Alec's name. He refused. She said, I don't care about our marriage, Alec told Trenton. He suggested City Hall, a small ceremony, a meaningful trip. Laura called that insulting. She told him he was just like Stanley. That comparison hit Stanley harder than he expected when he heard about it. She thinks wanting something small is a flaw, he muttered. The breaking point. In October, Alec told Laura he wanted to separate. Not because of one argument, but because of the year, the obsession, the public embarrassment, the fixation on appearances over partnership. She doesn't talk about us anymore, Alec told Trenton. She talks about how things look. That sentence lingered with me, because that had always been the core issue. Not the buffet, not the venue, the optics. Alec moved out 2 weeks later. Laura was stunned. She genuinely hadn't seen it coming. The social media narrative. 3 days after Penny told Stanley about the separation, Laura posted on Facebook. It was long, emotional, strategic. I am going through the hardest time of my life. My family abandoned me when I needed them most. My marriage ended because I was unsupported. Hundreds of comments poured in, from people who did not know the full story. You deserve better. Stay strong. Cut out toxic people. A few people pushed back. One of Penny's friends commented, sometimes we have to take responsibility for our actions. Deleted. Stanley's aunt commented, I love you, but reflection is important. Deleted. Then Laura posted again. I'm removing negative people from my life. She blocked Penny. Stanley stared at the screen. She's rewriting the story, he said quietly. He called her. She didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I'm sorry you're hurting, he said gently. I'm here if you want to talk. She never called back. The move. 2 weeks later, Trenton called again. She's moving, he said. To where? Stanley asked. Colorado. New job. No goodbye dinner. No closure. She told her parents she needed a fresh start. Being near the family is too painful, she said. The irony wasn't lost on me. Penny met her for coffee before she left. Trenton went too. Stanley offered to come. Laura specifically said no. The meeting didn't go well. She was polite, Penny told us later, but cold. Penny cried. Laura didn't. She said she forgives us, Penny whispered, but she needs distance. Forgiveness without apology. Distance without repair. That was how she left. Alec's apology. Around the same time, Alec reached out to Stanley. They met for lunch. I should have said something sooner, Alec admitted. About how she treated you both. Stanley nodded. I didn't want to cause conflict, Alec continued, but silence is still participation. That sentence stayed with me, because it explained so much about the years before this. Alec was dating someone new. He looked lighter. Stanley didn't resent him, but he also didn't reach out again. The quiet aftermath. Lara's social media went silent. Her Instagram went private. Her Facebook activity slowed to holiday texts. Happy Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas. Short, neutral. Penny responded with paragraphs. Details. Questions. Lara replied with, I'm fine. Stanley's relationship with his parents shifted. He called Penny every Sunday. She texted him daily. Recipes, articles, He was filling the silence Lara left behind. I watched Penny shrink slightly over that year. She smiled less. She checked her phone more. Waiting. The photo box. One evening, Penny brought over a box of old photos. Stanley and Lara as children. Halloween costumes. Birthday cakes. Holding hands. Penny stared at one photo. Stanley dressed as a pirate, Lara as a princess. I don't know where it went wrong, she whispered. Trenton said quietly. People change. Not like this, Penny replied. Stanley didn't argue. He just hugged his mother. And I realized something heavy and unavoidable. Sometimes karma doesn't just hit the person who caused harm. It ripples outward. Through parents, through siblings, through silence. Lara built her life on how things looked, and when that illusion cracked, she chose distance over accountability. Stanley once told me, I miss the sister she used to be. He paused before adding, I don't miss the person she became. That's the kind of sentence that only comes after years of loving someone who refuses to see themselves clearly. But this wasn't the end, because while that chapter closed quietly, another one was about to begin. And this time, it would be my marriage on the line. For a long time, I thought the story had ended. Lara moved to Colorado. Alec moved on. Stanley and I bought a small house the following summer, with the $15,000 Penny had originally promised for our down payment. Life settled. We painted the living room ourselves. We argued over light fixtures. We planted herbs in the backyard that mostly died because we forgot to water them consistently. It was quiet, stable, peaceful, and yet something felt unfinished. Not dramatic, just unresolved. The visit to Colorado. In March, Trenton and Penny flew to Colorado to visit Lara. Penny called us the day they came back. Her voice sounded thinner. It was strange, she said. She showed us her apartment, talked about work, her promotion, her new friends. That sounds good, Stanley replied carefully. She didn't ask about you. Silence filled the call. She didn't ask about Hannah either. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed her validation, but because it confirmed something. We were no longer part of her story. Penny had tried once to bring up the past. I told her I missed her, Penny said softly. She said she misses us too. That's good, Stanley offered. But then she said she's happy with her new life, that she's not ready to come home, that she might never be. I watched Stanley's expression tighten. Penny cried on the plane ride back. Trenton didn't say much. He never does when something truly breaks. The question I was afraid to ask. That night, after the call ended, I asked Stanley something I'd been holding inside. Do you think pulling the funding was worth it? He didn't answer immediately. He walked to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, took a sip. Yes, he said finally. Even if it cost you your sister? He met my eyes. It didn't cost me my sister. It revealed who she was. I absorbed that, but I could see the conflict in him. He missed her. Not the adult Lara. The child in the pirate and princess photo. The version before status mattered more than connection. And I realized something heavy. Karma didn't restore balance. It just exposed truth. And truth is lonely. The emotional weight at home. Stanley's relationship with his parents improved after Lara left. He called Penny every Sunday. She texted daily. Recipes, photos, articles. He responded. Every time. I started noticing something subtle. He wasn't just being a good son. He was compensating. Filling a gap. Trying to make sure his parents didn't feel abandoned twice. One evening, I watched him on the couch, laughing at something Penny had texted. But the laugh didn't reach his eyes. Are you okay? I asked gently. He nodded. I just wish it didn't feel like I'm the only child now. That sentence lingered in the room long after he said it. The box of photos. A few weeks later, Penny brought over old photos again. She placed the box on our dining table like it was fragile. Stanley flipped through them quietly. There was one photo that stopped him. He didn't say anything. I leaned over. It was from elementary school. Lara and Stanley at a science fair. They were standing close, smiling naturally. No tension, no comparison. Just siblings. Penny's voice trembled. I don't know when she started needing everything to look perfect. Stanley closed the album. I think she always did, he said softly. The honesty in that statement made the room colder. My private doubt. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling. I replayed everything in my mind. If we had just ignored her comments, if Stanley hadn't uninvited her, if Penny hadn't pulled the money, would Lara still be here? Would the family still feel whole? I turned toward Stanley in the dark. Do you ever think we escalated it? He was quiet for a long time. No, he said finally. Setting boundaries isn't escalation. I wanted to believe that fully. But part of me still wondered. Because families don't fracture over one argument. They fracture over patterns. And maybe this had been building long before I ever arrived. The hollow victory. People sometimes imagine karma as satisfying, as poetic, as balanced. But watching Penny check her phone every night, hoping for a longer text from her daughter, watching Stanley swallow the word sister like it hurts to say, watching Trenton avoid bringing her up unless Penny does first. There was no triumph in that, just quiet loss. And that was the darkest part. Not anger, not revenge, just absence. The final realization. A week ago, Lara sent Penny a longer message. She wrote that she was doing well, that she had been promoted, that Colorado felt like home. She didn't ask about Stanley. She didn't mention the wedding. She didn't apologize. Penny showed us the text. Stanley read it. He nodded slowly. She sounds happy, he said. Penny's eyes filled. I wish she wanted to share that happiness with us. After they left, I stood in our kitchen and looked around. Our modest home. Our herb garden struggling in the backyard. Our life. Real. Imperfect. Peaceful. And I understood something with painful clarity. Lara didn't lose everything. She chose something else. And sometimes the hardest part isn't watching someone fall. It's watching them walk away and convince themselves they never fell at all. I thought that was the end of the story. I thought we had reached the lowest point. I was wrong. Because just when the family fracture began to settle into silence, a new crack appeared. And this time, it was inside my own marriage. I didn't expect the next fracture to happen inside my own house. After everything with Lara, Stanley and I had grown closer, or at least I thought we had. But peace can sometimes look like routine, and routine can hide distance. The small change. It started quietly. Stanley downloaded Instagram. That alone wasn't suspicious. He'd never cared about social media before. He barely used Facebook. But suddenly, he was scrolling at night, laughing softly at memes, following coworkers. It's just easier to keep up with people, he said casually. I didn't question it. We weren't the kind of couple that policed phones. We trusted each other. Or at least I did. The morning everything tilted. One Tuesday morning, he left his phone on the bathroom counter while he showered. I wasn't snooping. I was brushing my teeth when his phone lit up. An Instagram notification preview from someone named Maya. And the visible part of the message said, "Miss you already." My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling. I stood frozen, toothbrush still in my hand, staring at the screen until it went dark. Stanley came out of the shower, grabbed his phone without checking it, kissed my forehead, and left for work. Like nothing had shifted, but everything had. The first confrontation. That evening, I kept my voice calm. Who's Maya? He hesitated, just for a second. She works in my office building, he said. Different company. We met in the elevator a few times. And she misses you? He laughed lightly. Office people talk like that sometimes. She's new in town, probably just trying to make friends. I watched his face carefully. Can I see your messages? He handed me the phone immediately. The conversation looked tame. A few messages about coffee, office views, nothing explicit. But the message I had seen that morning wasn't there. I saw something about missing you, I said quietly. You probably misread it, he replied. The confidence in his voice almost convinced me. Almost. The shift in his behavior. Over the next few days, I noticed changes. Subtle ones. He took his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. He smiled at his screen sometimes. When he went out for drinks with coworkers that Friday, he changed shirts twice. Used cologne. He rarely did that. She joined us, he said when he came home. Who? Maya. He described her vaguely. Dark hair, around 30, recently moved from Portland. He sounded rehearsed. The discovery. Sunday afternoon, while he was mowing the lawn, I logged into his Instagram. He had given me the password months ago for something unrelated. I told myself I was just confirming my paranoia. I wasn't. There were dozens of deleted messages restored in the thread. Flirty. Intimate. Photos of her in workout clothes. Compliments from him. Fire emojis. Plans for lunch. A coffee date. A message from Friday night. I've been wanting to tell you something. My hands trembled as I scrolled. There it was. An emotional affair. Maybe more. I took screenshots. Closed the app. Put the phone back. Sat at the kitchen table. Our dog rested his head on my knee. I felt like the air had been vacuumed out of the house. The confrontation that changed everything. Monday evening, Stanley came home and said, I need to tell you something. He sat at the kitchen table. I feel like we've been growing apart, he said carefully. I've been talking to someone who's helped me process that. My heart pounded. Who? Maya. He said she was a good listener, that she suggested couples counseling. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots. His face went pale. He stared at them, then at me. I can explain. Those words, they always mean something worse is coming. He said nothing physical had happened, that it had gotten too close, that he meant to set boundaries, that he was going to tell her they needed space. But the messages didn't sound like boundaries. They sounded like desire. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just said, I'm going to my sister's. And I packed a bag. The lie that sealed it. For a week, he called constantly, apologized, said he blocked her, said he wanted to fix it. We met for coffee. He handed over his phone. The messages were gone. Everything looked clean. But something inside me wasn't convinced. So I did what I had never done before. I investigated. I found Maya's public Instagram, photos of dinners with a special someone, a familiar shirt across the table, coffee shop pictures with the same arm visible. When I confronted Stanley, he denied it, then admitted he had met her twice more for closure. Closure. I almost laughed. He had lied again. That was the moment. Not the flirting. Not the first lie. The second one. I realized I wasn't fighting for truth anymore. I was fighting through deception. And I was done. The decision. I blocked his number. Called a divorce attorney. Filed papers the following Friday. He was served at work on Monday. He called from a different number. Crying. Begging. Promising. I listened quietly. I can't trust you, I said. And that was the end of the marriage. The truth from a stranger. A woman named Sarah contacted me. She worked in the same building. She confirmed what I suspected. It wasn't just emotional. They had been meeting for over 2 months, flirting openly in elevators, leaving together. Maya wasn't new to town. That was another lie. Stanley had rewritten reality in small, careful edits, and I had almost believed him. That was my turning point. Not anger, clarity. I realized something powerful that day. I had survived a sister-in-law who tried to humiliate me. I could survive a husband who tried to gaslight me. The story wasn't about buffet weddings anymore. It was about boundaries. And this time, I wasn't waiting for karma. I was becoming it. The divorce moved faster than I expected, not because it was easy, but because once the illusion broke, there wasn't much left to argue over. The legal end. We had been married less than 5 years. No children. One house. Shared savings. Shared debt. The emotional damage was complicated. The paperwork wasn't. Stanley tried to contest the divorce at first. But when Sarah agreed to provide a statement confirming the affair, his attorney advised him to settle. He admitted to the relationship in writing. Not romantic wording. Not dramatic. Just legal acknowledgement. We split assets. I kept the house. I had contributed more to the down payment and handled most renovations. He kept his retirement account. Everything else was divided evenly. 8 weeks after filing, it was finalized. Just like that. 6 years together. Reduced to signatures. The grocery store moment. A month later, I ran into them. At a grocery store. Stanley and Maya were standing in the produce aisle, comparing avocados. Maya saw me first. Her posture stiffened. Stanley turned. He didn't look ashamed. He looked uncomfortable. Hannah, he said, like we had just run into each other casually. I didn't answer. I finished grabbing what I needed and walked away. When I got home, there was a text from him. I'm sorry you had to see that. I hope we can be civil. I blocked that number, and every number after that. There would be no civil. There would be distance. The professional collapse. 2 weeks later, Sarah called again. She hesitated before speaking. I thought you should know. Stanley had been fired. Maya, too. The affair had created a conflict of interest. Maya worked for a client company. The situation became public inside the office building. Elevator gossip. Client complaints. Concern about professionalism. Stanley's firm chose reputation over loyalty. He was let go. Maya was terminated from her position as well. Their romance had become expensive. Financially, socially, professionally. Sarah added one more thing. He's telling people you ruined his life. I didn't even feel anger when she said that. Just confirmation. He still wasn't taking responsibility. The family pressure. Then his family started calling. His mother first. He's going through a hard time, she said. Maybe you could reconsider. His sister called next. He made mistakes, but he's a good man. I kept my voice steady. He made choices. His mother accused me of being cruel, of throwing away a good marriage over a mistake. I hung up, blocked the numbers, changed my phone number entirely, and deactivated my social media for a while. Peace isn't passive. Sometimes you have to build it brick by brick. The final twist. 3 months after the divorce, I heard through a mutual friend. Stanley had cheated on Maya too, with someone else. Maya discovered it. She left, moved back to Portland. Stanley was alone, jobless, reputation damaged. I didn't feel satisfaction, just validation. Patterns don't change because partners do. They change because people do. And he hadn't. The attempted comeback. 6 months after the divorce, I received a letter from his attorney. Stanley wanted to modify the settlement. He claimed financial hardship. He asked me to help pay some of his debts. I laughed when I read it. Not loudly. Just once. Then I forwarded it to my attorney. The response was swift. The agreement was final. No grounds for modification. Further frivolous action would result in him paying my legal fees. I never heard about it again. The reputation narrative. I ran into one of his former coworkers at a cafe. They told me he had been applying for jobs but struggled because word had spread. He was telling people I destroyed his career, that I had exaggerated, that I had been vindictive. I responded calmly. I never spoke to anyone about him except my attorney. Truth doesn't need volume. It stands on its own. Rebuilding. 6 months alone in the house felt different than I expected. At first, the silence was loud, but slowly it softened. I redecorated, painted over colors he had chosen, rearranged furniture, removed reminders. I built an emergency fund, received a promotion at work, started managing a small design team, adopted new routines, morning coffee on the porch, evening walks, therapy sessions I didn't skip. I started dating again, slowly, carefully. A man who teaches elementary school. Kind eyes. No grand promises. No performance. Just presence. And that felt enough. The final contrast. One night, sitting alone in the living room, I thought about Laura. The obsession with appearances. The humiliation she tried to impose. The palace that collapsed. Then I thought about Stanley. The lies. The secrecy. The downfall that followed. Both of them had something in common. They built their lives around how things looked, not how they felt. And eventually, the structure cracked. The quiet victory. I didn't win anything. I didn't get revenge. I didn't destroy anyone. I just chose not to stay where I wasn't respected. That was enough. 2 years ago, I thought the biggest test of my life was a buffet wedding. Then I thought it was losing a sister-in-law. Then I thought it was divorce. Now I understand something different. None of those things were the real test. The real test was whether I would shrink to make other people comfortable. And I didn't. The garden was never the problem. Lara believed elegance was measured in square footage, guest counts, and gold foil invitations. Stanley believed validation could come from outside attention. Both of them confused appearance with worth. And I almost did too. For a brief moment, when I saw that ballroom announcement, when I saw the $120,000 budget, when I saw the Instagram captions dripping with superiority, I wondered if we had done something wrong. But here's what I know now. Our 58-guest garden wedding lasted longer than her luxury fantasy. Our buffet dinner created more genuine laughter than her designer tasting menu ever did. And my small, modest house feels warmer than any ballroom ever could. Because peace doesn't need an audience. Accountability is expensive. Lara paid in deposits. Stanley paid in reputation. But the real cost wasn't financial. It was relational. When you refuse to take responsibility, people eventually step back. And when enough people step back, you're left alone with the story you've been telling yourself. That's a lonely place to live. Penny's lesson. Penny still texts Lara on holidays. Still hopes. Still believes reconciliation is possible. And maybe it is. But reconciliation without accountability is just denial dressed up as hope. I've learned something watching her. You can love someone deeply and still refuse to fund their delusion. You can miss someone and still uphold your boundary. My lesson. When Stanley cheated, I had 2 options. Stay and negotiate my worth, or leave and protect it. I chose protection. Not because I'm cold, not because I'm proud, but because love without respect is erosion. And I had already spent years watching erosion destroy a family from the outside. I refused to let it destroy me from within. Where I am now, I wake up in a quiet house. There are no raised voices, no sarcastic jabs disguised as honesty, no hidden messages on phones. There is space. There is calm. There is growth. I've learned that strength doesn't look like yelling in kitchens or exposing people publicly. It looks like walking away when the ground shifts beneath you. It looks like choosing dignity over drama. It looks like building a life that feels right, even if it doesn't photograph impressively. Final thought for you. If someone mocks your simplicity, if someone tells you your joy isn't glamorous enough, if someone tries to convince you that small means insignificant, remember this. The people who need the biggest stage often have the most fragile foundations. You don't need chandeliers to prove your marriage is real. You don't need a luxury venue to prove your worth. And you certainly don't need to stay in a relationship that treats you like a prop. I once thought karma was loud. Now I know it's quiet. It waits. It watches. And when truth finally surfaces, it doesn't scream. It settles. And the only thing left standing is what was built honestly. Thank you for staying with me through this story.